So, Steve, where and when were you born?
I was born in Cambridge in England in 1950. But then my earliest memory is not really of Cambridge. We grew up in Glasgow because my dad got a job in nuclear physics. And Glasgow was the hotbed of nuclear physics because he had been he'd worked on radar in the war, and the guy who was in charge of the whole radar thing went into nuclear physics, and he knew my dad, so he invited him to come and work with him.
But you don't have a Scottish accent at all. You have
I don't have a Scottish accent.
I'm going to be back in 1 minute.
All right. We were very proud of our English heritage, but I probably did have a residual one which I lost. We travelled around the world. We travelled to Italy, and then we went down to England, and then we went to California, and that's where I met Laurel originally.
What month were you born in? I'm interested in your astrological sign.
Oh, August the 31st. So I'm Virgo.
You're Virgo. And then what brought you to California? You came with your work?
I came with my parents because my dad got a job at the Stanford Linear Accelerator, so that's how we originally met.
But was Laurel married to her first marriage at that point?
No. Then at that point we were in high school.
We met in high school when we were 15 and 16. And we were kind of each other's first love. And then we married other people, had 2 kids each, got back together in 93. And it was I'm still giving each other. It was still there.
Oh.
So we eventually got back 2 divorces and back together. And Steve moved here with his 2 kids in 95.
How did you get back together?
Let's see. We managed to keep in touch because Laurel was still friends with mutual friends that we had in England, so we got in touch like once every 7 years or so. We would catch up with each other.
Well, there was a little drink and dialing late at night occasionally when you get nostalgic about an old boyfriend. And then there were occasional faxes and maybe a letter or two. Just that person who always stays in the back of your mind.
I think also you had a friend who was working in England, and you asked her to see if I was in the phone book, which I was. I was in the London phone book, and
so this is in the early 90s, and it was a real coincidence. My best friend's husband got an assignment in England, and she ended up settling in a little village outside of London. Found Steve in the phone book when there was no internet. That's the way you found people. And he was there, and she called him up and asked if that was the Steve Bellamy who knew Laurel Leone, and it was. So when I went to visit her, it turned out she only lived about
5 miles away.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
We just that's how we really got back together, in the connection that led to our marriage.
And what was your marital status at that point when you visited your friend?
Married.
Oh, okay. Well, then maybe we should leap into why you got divorced, because you and Steve seemed so compatible, and you had such a partnership and such a system and whatever.
Well, and you were married but separated at that time, or were you married the first time I saw you still living together?
Well, still supposedly living together, yeah, but yeah.
Right.
The first time we met in...
You were still married as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happened to my marriage with Steve Wegener? Well, there was an infidelity that I found out about when I was pregnant with Whitney in 80, and I think because we'd had an agreement that that wouldn't be a deal breaker, I kind of stuffed it, but I think it actually really bothered me. But I couldn't admit that to myself even, and I think it finally came out at a later time. And I think, my focus was so much on my career and the kids, and I don't think I had enough juice for. Definitely having kids was what changed things, and your book even said that all along. And I think that I made a lot more accommodations in my career and my life to be a parent than he did, and I think that I just built up resentments over that. I think the infidelity it kind of created an emotional barrier. We did take parenting classes, and we really, I think what we ended up concluding that we had a good business working relationship. We were good project managers. We managed the house and the finances and the logistics.
His job. He was a project manager.
He was a project manager. The logistics of it, very good at it. The logistics of running a home, a family, kids, summer camp, transportation, vacations, but the emotional content, the emotional part of it, the just love and devotion and affection suffered and just waned over time. I think when I met Steve, I didn't think, given our situations geographically and maritally and everything else, that I actually could get back together with him at that time. But there was such an emotional connection. I thought I would rather have a chance at that kind of being happy with someone and feeling loved and special in that kind of way. I would rather have a chance at that than stay in this marriage.
I read over the 1989 interview with Steve W., and it was you described it as hectic. Steve said it was like a motorcycle ride, just poof, poof, poof. But the way you coped was having systems, like to replace the stay-at-home mom, weekly meetings, a house cleaner, the family clap, the full moon celebration, the pen game, bi-weekly family outings. And so I wonder if that was just exhausting and didn't leave time for enjoyment of each other.
I think most of that was a good idea, and that's part of the project management stuff. I don't think that things fell down because of that. I just think that in itself, I don't think that was the problem. I think it was more just the situation of two careers and two kids and a house. That wasn't a substitute for the emotional stuff. And I think when I did get together with Steve and Steve Bellamy, and Steve Wagner found out, because I had sort of lied and cheated at that point, I'd say the deal breaker for me was that he it was the sex that he cared about more than the love. And he almost said that in that many words. I'm being really blunt here. But love was what I cared about. Right.
Why did you marry him in the beginning, Steve W.?
Well, we had a great time together, but I have to admit it had a lot that there was a lot of drugs and alcohol mixed in to the mix. This is in the late 70s. The first time I found a guy, I don't think this is going to help your book. The first time I found a guy who kind of drank and smoked weed like I did, and who was tall enough. That was a factor. I'm 5'10", and I fit under his arm when we walked down the street. I liked his build, and all of those qualities are actually still the same about Steve Bellamy's tall, and I really like his body. But he said that one thing he liked about me was I rolled my own joints. And everything we did, we smoked marijuana, and I don't think we ever talked with you about that. And he had grown up in an alcoholic family. He's classic ACA. Both his parents were alcoholics. His mother died of lung cancer, but I think she would have died of alcoholism if that had, of liver disease, if the lungs hadn't gone first. And I grew up in a not alcoholic family as an adopted child, but when I met my biological parents, there was alcoholism. And my paternal grandfather died of alcoholism. He was very prominent and successful, but he was an alcoholic, and it killed him. So I think that, and then I got into recovery. My doctor, everything came apart in 1993. I met Steve. I quit my corporate job on my birthday, and I just took a year off. My mom died. I had enough money not to work for 1 year. It was her big gift to me. I mean, that wasn't what she intended me to do, was get a divorce, but it gave me a chance to step back from that rat race. And I did things I never had time to do. I volunteered with the PTA, which I actually did not enjoy, but I'd always wanted to do it. And I got healthy and went to the gym. But I couldn't change the drugs and alcohol. And let's see, what happened?
Your father told you had to do something about it.
Oh yeah, my birth father. I was trying to start my own business, and I couldn't seem to get completely clean and sober enough to get that going. And I had this meeting up in Seattle with somebody who was going to help me launch my new business idea, which I did eventually do. But I got really drunk and had a big fight with Steve Wagner the night before. We had our blow up, and he literally threw the kitchen table through the window, and told me to move out, and said he'd put all my things out on the street. I mean, really the worst fight we'd ever had. And I was in no shape to go to Seattle to have this business meeting. And I lined up my second only in my life meeting with my birth father, who was a judge up in Seattle. And I had to call him and tell him what was going on and that I wasn't going to meet him for lunch. And he started questioning me like a judge. And amazingly, I told him the truth about my drug and alcohol use and my marriage and everything. And I said I was going to get divorced. And he said, before you do that, you need to get yourself straightened out and then figure out what you want to do. And that was the beginning of getting clean and sober.
Did you go to AA, or what helped?
Well, first I went to my doctor, and he made me go to therapy, and then the therapist and the doctor ganged up on me and said I had to go to an outpatient treatment program, which I didn't think I needed, but they made me, and I did that. And they made me go to AA, which I also didn't want to do or think I need. But yes, I ended up in AA, and I'm still in AA, and I did stay sober.
And what was Steve W. doing when you were getting clean and sober?
Nothing.
So
that was okay. I mean, he was just doing his own thing. He didn't, he was supportive of my going to these, to the program. He didn't oppose it, but he wasn't particularly involved in it. I think I had for only ever time in the hospital, I had a kidney surgery in the middle of this same year. Like, my mother died, got clean and sober, quit my job, marriage blowing up, and I had my only medical incident ever. And I knew that a sign of the intimacy issue was that he was not the one I wanted to be there for me when I got out of the surgery. It was my best friend.
Just to finish the infidelity thing, was it like a one-night stand or was it a relationship that he had?
His was a one-night stand on a business trip, one of his business trips.
So I don't understand why that was so momentous, because for him it was probably meant very little.
I think that's true. I think it broke my heart, and I just I found out about it when I was pregnant with Whitney, and I don't think that was the only thing. I think the fact that I couldn't have done that, and for him it was no big deal, was part of the problem. I mean, there were a lot of things that were wrong, and you could argue that our relationship wasn't even built on a very good foundation when it was so tied up with drugs and alcohol.
Right. And did he remarry after your divorce?
Yes. Did he remarry once or twice? Was it just Mihaela? I think he had several
girlfriends, some of which he actually lived with.
Right.
Briefly, yeah.
And he's always had good taste in women, actually. Though the one he married, the kids weren't too keen on, and I thought was not the best choice. But she was a nice person, just not.
She was from his old hometown.
She was his a friend from high school also.
And did he ever give up alcohol and pot?
No. He died of lung cancer.
Is there
Probably
a connection?
more pot smoking than cigarettes. He had smoked cigarettes earlier, but not for decades.
And where and when were you born? I want to know your astrological sign.
I'm a Capricorn, and I was born January 12th, 1951 in Palo Alto.
So, Steve, what happened with your marriage? Why did you pick your wife, and why did you unpick her?
Good question. Why I picked her? I think I was very insecure. I think, and when I met her, it seemed like she sort of understood me, and sort of. But it's kind of odd because I always try to make things work, and so I went on trying to make it work long after it wasn't really working. It was a sort of regular thing that we would split up.
Actually live separately.
And actually live separately. Yeah.
And then how your kids are about the same ages?
Well, let's see. Ben is a bit.
Let's see. So, Steve, why did you marry your first wife? What attracted you to her?
You know, thinking back on it, I know there was my insecurity and so on. But I think from her point of view, I think I was she was an only child and she really looked up to her father. So I think she saw me as a sort of mature father figure. And that had a good side and a bad side. And I think, as she became more herself, she had a life of her own, no longer a student and so on, that she then I think we grew apart to a certain extent. And also, I think it's not a good idea to see your husband as a sort of father figure, because then you look for excitement in other places. And I think that's what she tended to do.
Gail Sheehy, that old book, Passages, says that women do that, and then around 29, 30, they kind of grow up and say, I don't want a daddy anymore. So it's kind of a typical pattern.
Right. I can see, yeah. So I think there's a little bit of that in it. And that's probably about the time we first started sort of No, we split up before that. So I think it didn't
Take
just
that
start
long.
at 29. It was earlier.
You had a whole series of
We had a whole
separations
series
over
of-
the years
yeah.
where you were living in different cities from
Right,
each other.
right. I left her. We were living in Leeds. I left her and went to London and started a new life. I had other girlfriends and stuff. And then we got back together.
And had the 2 boys.
Well, we didn't have the 2 boys till much later because she actually had problems conceiving. She had a couple of miscarriages, so that's why one reason why my kids are younger than Laurel's kids.
Mm-hmm. So what was the impetus to get set to separate?
In the end, she went off with somebody else. Some guy, this guy, the Dutch guy that she met in at a conference, which she tried to hide, but not very well.
But she was still officially at that point living with you and the 2 boys.
Officially,
Nico was a little baby, right?
Right, he was. Yeah. Yes, he was still very young. Yeah. 1 or 2.
And so you were the main caregiver to the boys because
Right.
she earned more and you did part-time teaching.
Right.
So that enabled you to set the pattern so you could get custody of the children when you came to California.
Right. Right.
I think the comment in the evaluation of the social workers that kind of sums it up that I recall was she loved the boys very much but didn't necessarily understand what was involved in parenting.
Yeah.
Is that about right?
I think that's true. Yeah.
But that is what more or less.
She tried to go on living her life as if she didn't have the
more or
kids.
less what they what they said and why that you won the custody.
Mm.
So what was it like for you two having combined family with 4 kids who didn't have a background, a tradition together? How did you manage that?
Well, we were just talking. I have to repeat.
Right. So my best friend saw this announcement, knowing that we had been struggling with, the new family together, and the kids dealing with, separation from their other parents, which was emotionally difficult for all of them, and there was quite a lot of antipathy in. Linda was, I would say, actively sabotaging your life here. She was very pissed, and I think the divorce had been a humiliation for her, losing custody. Steve Wagner he and I had a much more cooperative divorce. It was not contentious. We used a mediator.
He lived just up the road?
Yeah, he lived less than a mile from here. And so we had a 50-50 divorce.
Of course.
I mean, we had a 50-50 arrangement even in the divorce. And I really respect and appreciate that a lot.
So did you do week on, week off, or how did you?
That was the compromise. I would not recommend that to people. I thought it was difficult, but I get the benefit of it, and it's what he would agree to.
And how old were the kids when you separated? Because that makes a difference.
8 and 13.
Oh, they're old enough to handle that. Because for little
Yeah,
kids, I think a week is a really long time.
Right.
Did Daniel and Whitney understand that their parents were separated? Were they angry? How did they handle it?
They were a bit angry.
I think Danny was devastated, and I think you hear people talk about when you sit your kids down and tell them you're going to separate, and I think at 8 years old, I think that just was completely unexpected, like a meteor hit his life and kind of blew up the life that he was very happy in. And personally, I think he's never quite got over that. I don't think no kid wants their parents to get divorced unless there's sort of open warfare in the house. And Whitney, I think, at 13, threw herself into her friends and her horses. She worked at a horse ranch and, she was in horse shows and took lessons. And so I think she
was going through that phase where she argues with her mother a lot.
Right. It wasn't the greatest relationship between her and I. There were little frictions with Steve. Like I thought that he didn't have enough rules and just let the kids do whatever they wanted, and no bedtime. There wasn't enough rules. There weren't enough rules and structure. But I read Mom's House, Dad's House, which I think was the best help ever. And kind of accepted intellectually that it was okay to have one set of rules at Dad's house and a different set of rules at Mom's house, as long as I didn't think he was putting their life in danger, which I didn't. And so we got along. And then, so Kay found this announcement about Family Service Association. We went to a series of classes in a group of 6 weeks.
Yeah, there were like 3 couples, I think.
Yeah. And then we took another series of classes, and then we saw her individually, and we had, counseling with the 2 of us and counseling with one of us and one of the kids, and all different combinations. And we didn't see her every week, but we saw her as needed, and she really gave us the foundation to build on, to not assume that everything that went wrong was because of a blended family, and to sort of assume, innocent until proven guilty. And I completely credit her with helping us navigate those challenges.
What else did you learn from her that saved your marriage? Because that could help other people who are in blended families.
I can't think of anything in particular. I think maybe it was just the talking about it and seeing that there were other people that were had similar issues.
That was a huge help.
Yeah.
But I think the one thing she gave us, and this wasn't particularly a blended family tool, but she taught us a conflict resolution technique that we use to this day, although once we didn't have kids at home, there were a whole lot less conflicts.
And what was that tool?
It's just these steps we follow that if before things get too completely out of hand, that we've
done several different techniques, right?
But I think we actually literally pull out. I can scan it and send it to you. And it was, even before email and everything. But, we kind of decide to put it in a box, and whoever is ready first kind of makes an offer to the other one to take it out of the box. And we have a ritual symbol of giving each other a cup of tea when we're ready to have a peace talk. And then we have the method of, a very deliberate, active listening, where we all say everything that angers us and that we're mad at, and the other one mirrors until we, back and forth as many times as you need until you agree, yes, you heard me. And then we do it the other side. The other person gets to say everything. And then we brainstorm about what the actual underlying issue is, and then we brainstorm and we make a list, and we brainstorm on our solutions. And I have a file labeled marriage under M in my office with documented all these kind of times that we've done this over the years. And it might only have been once every year or so during those days. And now I can't even remember the last time we did it, maybe 5 years ago.
Right.
It was always something over the kids.
Did the kids do it too, or not?
No, not really.
Yes, we did. We've done it before with Nico.
Oh, we did it with Nico, yes.
The youngest one.
But with Danny, we used the open the front door technique.
Right. That was something he learned at a summer camp at Stanford, super camp. It was like, you observe, open the front door, OTFD. You observe this, you think this, you feel this, you desire this.
I observe that you're annoyed with me because I jumped down the sewer.
No, annoyed is later. I observe you jumped down. I observe you yelled at me.
Oh, okay.
When I jumped down the sewer. I think you're mad at me. My feeling is embarrassed. Yeah. Anyway, you get the idea.
And do the kids bond and end up like siblings, or was there always like?
I'd say eventually they did. Yes. I mean, it's like with all group of 4 kids, then each kid is not going to get on equally with the other 3, sort of thing. So, like, Nico is closer to Whitney, and always has been.
Than Ben is.
Than Ben is, for example.
Right. In fact, I think we've designated Whitney and Nico as our executors, to deal with our estate, because they get along really well. But I'd say also
people used to think that Nico was Whitney's kid.
At our wedding.
He's kind of small, and she would carry him around.
She's always kind of been mature for her
age.
age.
Yeah, right. She was mature for her age, and he looked younger than his age.
Right. And also Danny and Nico were close because they tended to be interested in the same non-traditional sports, like ice hockey and lacrosse and things, whereas Ben was more traditional basketball and
soccer.
So you have a call in 6 minutes, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, it's good that the kids bonded as siblings. That's really a good feeling. Now that Whitney is 40, my goodness, it's unbelievable. What have they done in terms of careers, college, marriage, that kind of thing?
Well, interestingly, all of the kids worked to some extent with us in the business, which we found really gratifying. Whitney worked with us for 5 years, I think,
Was it that long?
Yeah, I think, and really helped grow the business and built on the technical experience that she got, and transferred to UCSB, where she did marketing, ran marketing for the School of Engineering there, and she had gone to University of London as an undergraduate.
And she did physics, and she was taught by a lot of my father's faculty. He had retired, but she actually went to the college and was taught by a lot of the people who'd worked with him.
That's
amazing.
She
came fairly close to Steve's parents, who had raised 3 boys, and I must say really doted on her. And she would go home there if she wanted a home-cooked meal and a proper bath. And so I think they had a really nice relationship.
But so she used the science and the marketing that she got working with us to move on to the rest of her career.
And now she has a senior position in a publicly traded medium-sized startup that is in Santa Barbara, and she's doing really well and has stock. And I expect at some point they'll take a whole year off and travel around the world. They co-own a ranch in Central Coast with his parents, who are also kind of wealthy. And she's very well set up financially, I would say.
Great. And do they have kids?
1 child, 5 years old, our grandson.
Do you get to see him very often, or how does that work?
We used to see him more often until this year.
Oh, right.
We'll have to see him next weekend, actually.
I'd say we have seen him about every 6 to 8 weeks pre-COVID, and a little less during COVID. And we've immersed ourselves, or I did anyway, in sort of how to be a good grandparent, which is basically keep your mouth shut and don't offer any opinions on any parenting issues unless they're begging for it. And follow their rules when the kid is with you. But his parents are retired and live literally down the street from the kids, so they're
Wow.
the grandparents who see him very often, but they don't keep him overnight, and so when he comes with us, it's for 2 or 3 or 4 nights at a time. So
Nice.
we're the away grandparents, but we, in a way, get to do some of the funner things.
Yeah.
Everybody says being a grandparent is the best. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it's quite joyful.
What about Daniel?
What about Dan?
I'd say he's our probably the closest to the hippie in the family. He went to Humboldt State and has lived in San Francisco with friends. He's done worked in a bakery. What are some of his other jobs? What did he do when he was in? Oh, he's worked in our business until last year. He quit and was going to get a job in.
He worked with that guy. He likes working with his hands.
Yeah,
so.
carpentry and some landscaping. So I think he is very sad that it doesn't seem possible to make a living enough to afford to live around here where he grew up doing something with his hands. And he's more disturbed than any of the other kids about the, gross McMansions that get built every time a house in our neighborhood sells. So he feels like he grew up in a certain nice space and place that he liked, and it's transformed in ways that he doesn't like, and I think...
Of course it was already transformed, but he didn't see it even before that.
Right, but I think the greed...
It was a sleepy little... Palo Alto was a sleepy little university town when we were in high school, and it was already... Silicon Valley had already started when the kids were growing up, but it hadn't become.
But we weren't part of the startup and VC and all of that, and so I think he's one of those kids. I would say slow to launch.
It seems like a lot of boys are like that now.
Right. So he's been living with us, and we're charging him some. He's doing some work for us in exchange for rent, reduced rent, and then additional hours that he works. We're just paying him cash, and he's saving up enough money to move probably to Sonoma County because there's more of a hippie culture there, I'd say. But he has. Why I'm not too worried about him is he has really great friendships with kids. Who he's known most of them since elementary school, some since kindergarten, who he stays in regular contact with, and he seems to genuinely enjoy being with them.
They're all getting married and having kids.
But he doesn't seem too bothered by that. He's kind of the uncle, like the doting uncle on some of these kids. And my personal guess is that he'll meet some girl when he's, like in his 40s, and that'll finally be the right girl. But we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Steve, what about your kids? Did they go back to England or they stay in California?
Well, Ben went to England for university, and he was always the one who clung to his British identity more. Nico, he was very young when he came here, so he's way more American. Yeah. But Ben, he stayed in England. He wanted to become an actor. He went to acting school. He toured Italy a couple of years. In the end, though, he ended up doing more. Teaching was the thing he did. He was a teacher's assistant. That was the sort of thing he did in between acting jobs.
And a tutor.
And so on. And then he tried to get work in LA. He came back here because he got tired of London and he wasn't working out. And then so he was teaching while looking for jobs in LA. And Nico really wanted him to carry on doing that, but he got offered a really good teaching job, and so he took that. and moved back up here. And he was, how long was he living in San Francisco? Quite a long time.
Probably about 5 years, and he got some promotions, and he did a bit of acting, but as a hobby and a pleasure rather than having to make a living at it. And I think he also got into curriculum development, which he was good at. He got a master's in education.
Right. He even wrote a couple of kids' books.
Mm.
So, he wasn't making tons of money, but he was happy and financially could support himself.
And he took up running. He became a marathon runner.
Wow.
And that's where he met the woman he ended up marrying. And so he got married about 2 years ago, and they had a baby a year ago. And and then she is very tied to her roots in the Ann Arbor area. So they just moved back there from their literally one-bedroom walk-up in rent-controlled in San Francisco with their baby and their two cockatiels, and bought a house for that's the same size as our house for $600,000 in Ann Arbor. And so they have some space, and I'm sure they'll never come back out here. She's a nurse, but really a very senior nurse at UCSF, and she's just working remotely now, though I assume when COVID is over, she'll find some nursing position there. They're both very employable. He found a teaching job at a charter school in Ann Arbor before they even moved.
Right. He didn't even, he had no period of unemployment. He moved seamlessly from one job to the next.
Right.
Can Nico and Ben switch back and forth from British to American accents? Which ones do they tend to use?
Slowly, Ben has lost his English accent. He used to be much more.
They can both turn it on, but if you didn't know, you wouldn't have a clue they were British.
Right. Absolutely not. Yeah, Nico could really turn it on. He is an amazing mimic, so he can mimic all sorts of accents.
Right, Cockney and high posh British. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, exactly.
And he got married. Was it 1 or 2 years ago?
2 years ago. It was the end of the year.
But I know it was New Year's Eve. But are you sure it was 2 years?
Yeah, I think it was 2 years ago.
Okay, 2 years ago, Nico got married, and to his high school girlfriend. He'd been with her for 10 years, and we're quite close to the two of them. We've always seen more of them, even though they were in LA and Ben and Meg were in San Francisco. They just kind of share their life with us more. Even now we have a weekly Zoom date with them, and we always talk over an hour when we don't really need to, and we kind of do dates, kind of couples weekends where we take turns treating the other ones. So that's quite a joyful parent relationship. Katie is in online fashion editor, writer and editor, and Nico is very multi-talented. He's writing TV scripts and doing video editing for sizzle reels, and he does acting in commercials.
Yeah, he's been on several commercials.
So he's super employable. They're both earning decently and able to support themselves. And we actually went in as partners with them to help them buy their first house in Silver Lake. A little fixer-upper. Not a fixer-upper, just little, a builder-upper. And I think the deal was, we knew they wanted to do that, and it was a very positive experience, and we're just subtracting whatever equity they have in that house. That'll accrue to them, and when we die, we'll just take that much off of how much the other kids, get. Everything will be equitable, but we're gifting them theirs now.
Got
so
it.
that they can do the house.
Well, wait.
Yeah, so that's been positive. So is that
yes.
good?
So is it fair to say that the most challenging part of your relationship has been the kids, the blended family?
Probably.
While they were living at home and back and forth with their mom and college. But now I wouldn't say it just doesn't feel difficult. We get together for our annual holiday MLK weekend, we just skipped Christmas completely.
Because the kids were always with their other parents at Christmas. But, you know, that has its good side because it meant that, unlike most parents, we actually could just
go off and do
go off
something
and do
on
stuff.
Christmas.
Yeah, we could go to New York Christmas.
We did that a number of times. Yeah, flew on Christmas Day, easy. And we've formed a lot of nice family traditions that even the kids are proud of, I think, and talk about.
Like what?
Well, like we don't give presents at Christmas. We instead we give everyone money that they can give to the charity of their choice.
Well,
and we match it.
Right. We say how well, we assess how well the business is done, and then we allocate a certain amount that they can designate and divide any way they want to a nonprofit. And we did that starting when Nico was 5, and that grew directly out of the blended family because the weekend mom, the Disneyland mom syndrome, they would come back with, a ridiculous amount of stuff from her and her mother, and then we'd have our celebration in early January, and it's like they don't need more stuff. We don't want to compete. We don't even like that or believe in it or anything. So this was making lemonade. And we thought, well, maybe the kids will think that's kind of lame, but they thought it was really cool, even when Nico was 5. And you know how you can see kids' personalities and values.
Visit the rainforest.
Yeah. This Oswald, his first grade teacher, so he gave to that. And if you look at the giving history of each kid, I can, sort it on my Excel spreadsheet. It's been very consistent themes for each one of them that are very reflective of their respective personalities. And last year, I think and if they get married, we give the same share to the spouse. And now we gave the same share to Parker.
Right.
And, he gave to WBUR Boston because he loves their Circle Round Story Hour. And that's the NPR station there. And so they're passing that tradition on to their kids. And I think Ben and Karina will. So that's been a real joy and source of pride and family bonding for us.
Right. But we also, at King Day, we had this tradition that we'd give each other presents, but not actual presents. It was like we do something together.
I'll give you
activity based. So
like I'll give you a back rub or do the dishes for a week or something.
No, not service. It was entertainment. You say that. Go ahead.
I used to take Nico and I. He always chose to go. We give them an alternative, and Nico always wanted to go skiing with me.
Snowboarding.
He would snowboard. I would ski.
Yeah.
So we went every year until they moved to LA. Yeah.
But we still do King Day stuff like.
Right, but now it's more. We go somewhere in LA together.
Right, we'll go down to LA and we'll kind of wine and dine them for a weekend, but it'll be around some theme. Like last year, it was taking them to museums and restaurants that they had never been to, even though they were the natives.
Or parts of town they never visited.
Right.
I mean, LA is huge.
Walking tours and things like that. And
they took us on a walking tour. That was nice.
Right. And then Ben and Meg, they invited us up to do a sort of a day in the sunset, and they designed a kind of cool day for us. So, but it's all experiential, not material.
Got it. That's a great idea. Any other traditions like that people might want to duplicate?
Thanksgiving. I love our Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
We just had to get really flexible about holidays, and there's so many blended families who have these, wars over who's going to get the kid at Christmas, and we just let go of that really early on, and we let go of Thanksgiving, and now we just get together with them on Thanksgiving Friday and sometimes on Saturday, and we have a big potluck, and it's kind of fun. It takes all the pressure off. Like I remember growing up Thanksgiving, my mom would always get really stressed out and she'd cook everything herself, and she'd kind of be a wreck by the time we sat down to eat.
Yeah, my mom's like that too.
Oh, yeah.
Oh dear, Christmas.
But ours is like, I really have some great pictures and videos of all of us doing things in the kitchen, and each of them has developed their own specialty. Like Nico does the mashed potatoes, and we'll have funny stories of cooking accidents that have happened over the years that we laugh at.
That's great. How does one keep interested and kind of romance and sizzle over decades? That seems like it can be a challenge not to get bored with each other.
Well, one thing that we've done is, that Gottman, the work of Gottman, John Gottman up at UW.
Emotional intelligence?
No, it's all about couples work, and he has this 7-week course in, in affection. It's got a longish title, but every once in a while, I'd say maybe every 3 to 5 years, we've, things do feel like we get just distracted and not appreciating each other or feeling appreciated. And so we go through this, and it's exercises 5 days a week, and we actually write things down.
We haven't done that for a while.
Yeah, this would be a good time to do that, actually. And I have this in my file too. And so we have this in mind. Each week is a different set of assignments, and each night, maybe it's Monday through Friday, you at the end of the day share what your homework was with the other, and it's written. We write it down and read it to the other person. We each have a notebook for this, and it's reminding you of why you got together in the first place and the things you find special about the other person. But as the weeks go on, it's kind of doing some things together. But I think it's exactly.
It starts off pretty basic.
Yeah. But you say it's exactly to address what she asked about.
I guess that's true.
Yeah.
And what about sex? How does that keep from getting routine?
Well, it is kind of routine, but we do it. I would say, less crazy sex than before, kind of less variety of positions, and but still, I'd say quite affectionate. And I'd say for me, I feel really especially affectionate toward you after we've made love. On the day following that, I think it almost always kind of reconnects us. But you should say one thing.
I agree with that.
Any additions to that, Steve?
Not really. I mean, I think that's true. Yeah. I'd say there's probably a little less sex, but it's still very affectionate. Yeah.
Masters and Johnson talk about pair bonding is based on the shared memory of good times, and I think sex is one of those glues that creates pair bonding.
Right. But we also have a lot of good times together. We also decided, we should make sure that we try to, take an afternoon off and go up to the city. And when they open the museums, we said we should really start going to the museums. So because we always enjoy going up and doing something like that, and just walking along the Esplanade and stuff.
And we love traveling together. We're extremely compatible travel partners, and I'm sure you'd agree that you can love someone a lot but not be compatible with them as a traveler. So we're really lucky that way that the balance between planning and being spontaneous, and the degree to which we organize the itinerary around meals or something. And the amount we like to walk, and what kind of vacation we like, all of that. There's no one that I remotely would want to travel with, or think I would enjoy traveling with the way you and I do.
Is there some place you haven't been yet that's on your bucket list?
Well, we were going to go to Africa before.
I have a bucket
Okay.
list in my Dropbox file, and there's like about 20 places on it. There's so many places that I want to go. And we just did a series of roots trips over the last 5 years.
Right.
You should say about that.
Right. We went to Liverpool. We went to Glasgow. So I showed Laurel all the places I lived in Glasgow. Well, all the ones that hadn't been torn down. And even the school I went to, and the little newsagent where I buy some sweets, that sort of thing. And we also went to Yorkshire. We went back to University of York, although we do a lot of these things, and then you find everything's completely changed.
Oh.
Like the University of York was like 4 times as big as it was when I was there.
Wow.
And when we went to Bilbao, where I had the school, the whole town looked completely different. I thought, well, at least the football stadium will be the same, but no, they torn it down and built a much more exciting-looking football stadium than used to be there. That sort of thing. It had been a very industrial city, and a lot of the industry had died, the shipbuilding and so on, but they'd transformed it. Starting with building the Guggenheim Museum there, and that sort of thing. So
But I think we
still enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a great trip.
Yeah.
We had a yearning to share with each other the chunks of our lives, of our respective lives, that the other had not participated in. So when we did that Scotland trip, I got to see physically where these places were that I'd heard him talk about so many times. And it was very satisfying to me, like to have that picture of the house that you grew up in, and you always talked about getting up and it was cold and you'd go and, get in the drying cupboard or something to warm up in the mornings. And I really like to have a sense of place. And I took you to see when we were
Munich.
Oh yeah, I looked for the place that I'd been a student, a German student in for a semester in Germany, and tried to find the place that I'd rented, the room I'd rented. Took you to Brown University and some of the places where I hung out when I was a student there.
That was a lot earlier.
Yeah, but we've kind of made it a point to seek out those opportunities. So those have been fun trips.
That's a good idea. I like that. It's a personal history. If you believed in karma and that we pick major relationships to learn certain lessons, what would you say that you've learned from each other?
Ooh. I'd say not. Well, I think I was probably more judgmental back in high school.
So I was in your life to help you be less judgmental?
Yes.
Really?
I think so. I think I was a bit snobbish, intellectually snobbish and so on. That's all part of, a background of going to a private school in England, and which was all boys, and even though I didn't like it, I actually fought against it. I think it did have an effect on me. I think I've become a bit more relaxed.
And I think you always wanted to come back to California because one of the things you liked about here is it was less class driven than
England. That is one of the.
That's what Michael Apted's whole series is about, isn't it? Anything else?
Not off the top of my head. You got something?
I do believe in karma, though I think how I describe our attraction and ending up finally together after all, back together after all those years. my theory is that he reminded me of stuff I loved about my mom, and I reminded him of stuff he loved about his dad, and that our parents are in somehow part of our intimacy in a very kind of basic and primal way. And I think that we share, there's sort of an interesting male-female dynamic that I think he has a more developed female side than usual, than the men, most of the men I've been with. And I think I'm more of a kind of developed male side than the women he's been with. And that somehow that's worked really well for us. You know, I don't mean anything kind of weird sexually. And I don't know if you ever, I mean, I've told you about that idea, but I don't know if you agree with that.
It's like the BEM sex role inventory that androgynous people have. They can flexibly switch to both. And they're more mentally healthy and flexible than people who score masculine or feminine or undifferentiated, low on both. So it sounds like what you're talking about is androgyny, being able to have both aspects developed.
And I think, you know, Steve, even in high school, he complained about my being very kind of organized and scheduled, and he'd leave kind of sarcastic notes on my giant daytimer that I maintained even in high school. Do you think you could fit me in that kind of thing? And so I think Steve is a counter to that tendency in me, which is still alive and well.
And I think you're all probably, you do the opposite for me, that you sort of, you're a bit more disciplined at planning.
You can be a bit laid back.
Yes,
about
I can be a bit too laid back. So.
You know, the Kiersey and Bates, Myers and Briggs, Laurel, you're clearly a J, the kind of people who make lists and check them off. And Steve might be a P. Do you know what your scores are?
Look that up for you.
We actually did do a whole Myers-Briggs thing.
We even brought it, we did it for the family, but we even brought it in for the business. Do you remember that? We had somebody from UCSC come here and help us kind of take best advantage of each other in a positive team way.
I think that makes so much sense, because as a J, if I didn't know what P's were like, I would get really frustrated and irritated and upset. But when I know I'm working with a P, I know that they want to be flexible and flow and not be boxed in. And it definitely helps be less demanding or judgmental or impatient.
Let's see. I am ENFJ.
Yeah. I could have told you that.
Steve is INFP.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's pretty complimentary, I would
P
say.
and the J, as you said.
Yeah, that's pretty obvious. So yeah, and that's typical that couples have like two the same and two that are different, because then it provides interest and balance. Because if you're all the same, it could get boring, and if you're all different, then it's hard to understand the other person. So I think that's a good kind of balance. So some people have conflicts over housework or budgeting or whatever. How do you do cooking and cleaning and that kind of roommate stuff?
Now is not representative of the
that's what I'm
most
thinking.
of our married life. I have to remember what it was like before this year. It's really in flux right now, not just because of COVID either.
Right, well, it's Danny.
And there's you kind of having retired more to a larger extent than I have.
So I'm doing more of the cleaning. And I've always done the gardening. Laurel hardly ever does any gardening.
I've done more of the cooking.
You tended to do more of the cooking.
But now we're paying Danny to do the cooking, so it's the one time in my life I'll look back on fondly as having my own personal chef.
Oh, that's brilliant.
fabulous.
He's a very good cook.
Oh my God. Every weekend, he and I sit down, plan out the menu for the week, ask Steve if there's any special requests, and I type it up, and it's on the board in the kitchen. And Danny, about like 4 or 5 p.m. every night, starts cooking, and you do guitar practice or Spanish or whatever until dinner, and I work until dinner or exercise, and then we all sit down and have a unbelievable meal. I should send you some of the menus. Oh gosh.
Yeah, the only cooking I've been doing is I have been making bread.
Everybody's doing that during
Everyone's
COVID.
doing that.
The COVID cliche. He's got the sourdough starter.
Yeah.
I tried it, and my bread was about an inch thick. You could beat somebody up with it.
I got really good at it, I must say. And I also make. I used to do more cooking, like when I was looking after the kids. But the only thing I really made all the time was spaghetti, pasta sauce
And stir fry.
and stir fry, because those are the two things that the kids liked.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's funny. And then when the kids were with you, did you have like a house cleaner come in and like you did in your first marriage?
Every 2 weeks, probably the same house cleaner.
Oh.
Oh, maybe.
No.
Did we change and get a different one? Candida?
Candida came from Kay.
Right.
Kay recommended it.
Right. It could have been.
Was that the same cleaning you had before?
I don't remember, but yeah, we've always had every 2 weeks, but we canceled about 3 months into COVID.
It's really a lift to come home to a clean house that you didn't have to clean.
Right.
And we paid her for 2 or 3 months for not coming, but then we just thought we can just do it ourselves. Right.
Right.
And we didn't want them coming
also,
in.
we
It
don't
was a
have-
crew of 5 people.
We don't have kids or people working for us anymore. It's just you and me and Danny.
Right.
So.
What about finances and social tasks like, remembering people's birthdays or buying gifts or planning get-togethers?
I do all of the administrative and calendar stuff. And what was the first one?
Money, bills, finances, investments.
We probably share most of that.
Everything's joint. Everything just goes into a
I
big.
do all like the business accounts in QuickBooks, but Laurel does all the sort of personal spending and so on.
And the rental.
Yeah, and the rental stuff.
And I'd say I do more of the tax prep, like preparing all the reports and communicating with the tax. But that's pretty shared. And we don't, do each other's. I mean, that's pretty clear division of labor when it comes to, we've had the same finance guy for 20 years or more. We just follow his recommendations. Neither of us is especially interested in learning about it, but the truth is we don't have our rentals are our main investment, not we don't have a big pension plan or anything.
Right.
So how long have you been married at this point?
95.
December, 95, coming up on 25 years, coming up on 25
Coming up on
years.
25 years.
Wow. What are you thinking that you have goals or aspirations for the next 25 years, especially after COVID is over?
Well, one big thing I'm very excited about is we weren't able to celebrate a couple years ago the 50th anniversary of the day we met because it coincided with Steve's mother's 90th birthday and her death.
Oh, wow.
And everything was about her, and we took the whole family to England then, but we just decided to kind of bypass ours. But Steve just turned 70 and I'm turning 70 in January, and we were going to take the whole family to Africa but that's not going to happen. And so we decided to do something totally different in honor of Black Lives Matter and to kind of think global, act local. And there is a amazing organization that we became aware of serendipitously right in our own backyard on the Stanford campus, and it's the Martin Luther King Jr. Research and Education Institute.
Oh.
And we had the privilege of meeting the director of it, talking about all the work he's done for 25 years, and he's just retired but still very active in the work, and the initiatives that they've done. And we're aiming to we've told all the kids, no presents, no nothing, don't spend a penny on our birthdays, because many of our cousins and friends and relatives have done big, expensive bashes for their 70th birthday. But we're asking them instead to kick in whatever they'd like to contribute toward this institute. And they have a project called the World House Project. And it's the name refers to a speech that King made about how we all live together in the same house of the world. And we need to learn, how to get along with each other. And they've developed a curriculum that they're offering free, adapted to different ages, starting with elementary school up through college. And it hasn't been particularly well funded by Stanford, despite how rich they are, because all their money is going into engineering and, that. And so we're going to...
behind them, of course.
Oh, right. And I'm doing the podcast, so... and we've had several conversations with him since then, done some webinars, and before the end of this year, we're hoping to put together a really substantial contribution, mostly from us, but supplemented by anyone who wants to acknowledge our birthdays in that way. So that's very exciting to me.
That is. That's exciting. No one would think that you both are 70. What do you attribute your youthfulness to? What are your secrets of success, youthful success?
I don't know. Positive thinking.
I think it's a part genetic. I think we're both very lucky genetically.
That's true.
And your mom lived to be 90. Your dad, despite multiple bouts with cancer, lived into his 80s. Mm-hmm. And
he was very sportive.
Right, always.
Yeah.
Your mom not.
No, she was not at all.
But you take more after him, much more.
Yes.
And my biological parents, my birth mother is still alive and 90, and my birth father died at 87, but they were both active and with it, I'd say, right, all along. And we have always placed a high premium on exercise. So I still jog, but slow, very slow jog, 4 miles a day, almost every day. We eat really healthily, and...
We probably eat more healthy than we ever have before.
Right. Like all organic, locally produced meat. I think that's
we're lucky to live in California too.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm interested in the politics of food, and it's too bad that the work the Obamas were doing ended up getting pretty much arrested or reversed. But we very much agree with those kinds of policies, and we are very aware that it's a privilege to even be able to eat well, and to have good health care and preventative health. We're both Kaiser, and I am a huge fan of how much emphasis they put on preventative medicine and basic family care. So we're fortunate in every way that mostly that affluence, being relatively affluent, makes possible. So I don't have survivor's guilt about that, but I do have a passion about making that more the norm.
Right. A friend of mine who used to teach at the university with me moved back to northern Louisiana, and she has to drive an hour to find organic food, and then it's old because it's been shipped to some Walmart or something. It's a constant struggle for her. So we are lucky to live in California.
So lucky, and we have so many choices. We can do, organic food deliveries. There's, good egg or meal, semi-meal, partial meal prep services, and imperfect produce, and not that we do any of that, but there's the farmers market. There's robust organic sections in every local market because the local educated, affluent population here demands it. So we just have choice galore.
Yeah. Just to go back to your birth parents, when did you always know we're in touch with them, or was there a certain point where you got in touch with them again?
I wasn't always in touch, but I always knew. My parents were very conscientious about telling me what they knew about my adoption, and in reaction to kids growing up earlier in the 20th century who would discover some deep dark family secret after their parents died in the attic, and I was part of the chosen child syndrome, where the parents, in reaction to that, tell you, we chose you, you're special. So I literally grew up with this image that they went to the hospital, and there was like this assembly of babies, and they chose me. There are some psychological negative aspects to that, apparently. But anyway, when I was in my early 20s, my mom had told me that she had papers and that she'd share them with me whenever I wanted to know when I was an adult. And so I asked, and I thought we were going to go down to some safe deposit bank, and instead it was in some box in the hall closet. And she took it down and gave me this report, and it told me about, M the mother and F the father, and whatever background the attorney had been able to find out. And I tracked down F the father using some pretty ingenious detective work when I was in my mid-20s. And he at that time was a municipal court judge. And I literally walked into his courtroom and did the adopted child's fantasy of getting to observe him for a whole afternoon without him knowing who I was. And then at the end, I got to talk to him privately after a very tense exchange.
Oh, because he was surprised.
Well, he didn't know who I was. And I said I wanted to talk to him privately, and he, thought I was had some beef about some case, and it's I've never done anything I'm ashamed of, and anything you have to say, you can say right here, and I didn't want to blurt that out, and so I kind of ran out of the court and wrote this shaky note and came back in the court and put it on his desk, and he reads the note, and I'm really sweating. I planned this and rehearsed it, and it wasn't going like I'd rehearsed it at all. And then he just says, I'd be willing to talk with you in my chambers. And that was the start of what...
It was kind of like
that. Yeah. It was the start of what turned out to be a really nice relationship, though he still had young kids at home then, and I think it wasn't until they left home and went out, and he wasn't running for elected office.
No, I think it was sometime they were going. He and his wife were going on vacation
to Europe.
And they were worried that what if something happens and the kids find out? So they told the two kids before they went that there was this other child.
But he hadn't told them before that, and he told his wife, and she didn't believe it for sure and thought maybe I was just trying to get something over on him or get some money out of him. And so he went down and got a DNA test to prove to her that I was his kid. But he knew it. because I looked so much like some of the members of his family, but she didn't think I did.
Oh, and then did you meet your biological mom?
Yes, but that was a little more emotionally difficult. And I left a letter with the attorney in case she ever contacted him, but I didn't actively try to find her. It's a more loaded, you know. And she did find him several years later, when I was 29, I think. And I got a call out of the blue on a Saturday night from a drunk attorney, this drunk old guy, Philip Adams in San Francisco, who specialized in adoptions, and said that she was in town and wanted to meet me. It was really out of the blue. But that was when I had a brand new baby. My marriage was very shaky. And
You went out to Minneapolis to see her, though.
But on the way to a field project.
Yeah.
We were traveling a lot. It was quite an eventful summer. And then I met her, and I'm bizarrely like her, and every one of her kids and relatives comments on it. And I maybe ended up a little more like her, not being raised by her.
I don't
She has,
understand that.
Five half siblings, five
siblings.
kids from her. She had 5 more right after me, and he had 2. So I have 7 half siblings.
And have you
But I
met?
know them all, and you know, we've been very involved in all her. You know, she has a big party every 10 years for her birthdays, and I've been quite close to a couple of her daughters.
Yeah.
Well, even John as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 of the 5 I've been quite close with.
Well, that's kind of an expansive phenomenon to all of a sudden have all these half siblings. My goodness.
Right, and we just got back 2 weeks ago from Seattle because my 2 half siblings up there waited and scheduled the scattering of Jim's ashes on the Puget Sound, which was his wish, until we could be there.
Sweet.
And I spent a lot of time with him when he was sick in the hospital. Yeah, we were pretty close.
How sweet.
Yeah. Actually, one of the important things is that he had a genetic disease, ataxia, which both his other kids had.
And I luckily did
Yeah.
not. I participated at his request in some research that he and his family were doing at University of Washington, the leading national researcher on this disease.
What is it? I've never heard of it.
Ataxia, it affects your balance. It's a neurological disease.
It affects your balance. It affects your speech. So you sound a little bit as though you slur your words, and so you sound a little bit drunk, even though and yeah, you have
wobbly.
to
Like Tim doesn't use a walker. Linda does some.
She's trying to break away from it.
Right. Jim used a walker in the last 10 years of his life. I think they had to move to a place that he could get around better. So it's a pretty serious, debilitating disease.
Oh, wow.
He had to retire early because of the speech problem, because he thought he was afraid that people would think he was drunk.
Right. Last question is, then, if one of your kids who recently got married asked for your advice, saying, based on our experience, we really think you should do this and not do that, if they asked, what would you say?
But what
advice would you give them about how to make their marriages work over time?
how to make it work?
How to make their marriages work?
I mean, singular, their marriage work.
Right, because I'm just thinking, because we don't have, I wouldn't say I had great track record prior to our marriage.
I would say, there's no advice I'd give in particular, but I have to say that it was the ultimate compliment from all the kids, I mean, the three who are married more, that they've ever come and ask for relationship advice. With Ben, with Nico, he even has talked with us openly about his difficulties with his mom, and to trust us that's not exactly what you asked, but to trust us to the extent that he'd ask about Steve's ex-wife and know that we would genuinely tell him what we thought was in his best interest, and keeping peace with his mom, who he finds it difficult to deal with.
They both do.
Ben won't talk to us
No,
about
no,
it,
but
though.
I meant Nico and Katie both find it a bit difficult.
Right.
And
I think all
both
four of
said
them
so.
find it difficult, but Katie and Nico actually want to talk with us about it.
Right.
And I'd say,
And Ben probably wouldn't talk. Sometimes I think that he's, feeling a bit down, but he doesn't usually ask.
you tell he's introverted, but you can tell because it'll be more frequent that he'll just call during the week when he happens to be in the car on his way home. Like there was a flurry of those calls last week, so I think he was feeling a little lonely or something.
And he certainly had issues with previous girlfriends that he did talk to me about.
And me as well. I mean, I remember him calling up from England in tears, and so I think they see us as trustworthy resources on relationship issues. Katie and I, when we do our LA weekends, like we were telling you about, we're together for 48 hours. And so at some point during that weekend, you guys will be off doing your own thing at, beer tasting or whatever. And Katie and I will be shopping, and we'll just talk about little, girl things. Maybe things that she finds frustrating about Nico. We have a few jokes about the Bellamy boys, and I just say
they're all the same.
It's very easy. And Whitney, who I've had a more strained relationship with at times, we had done a little bit of therapy together, and that helped us a lot. She was open to that, and we kind of established some ground rules for each other. And just before Parker was born, I was very distressed because both Steve and I find her husband a little difficult. And I told her, I want to feel like I'm comfortable when I come see you now that there's going to be a grandchild in the mix. And we are willing to do just about anything to make this work. But we really have the feeling that Randy does not like us around, doesn't like us, and doesn't really want us to be there. And so we're open to any suggestions you have. That's how we put it out. And she and I had probably the most heart-to-heart talk we've ever had during the last few months of her pregnancy. And she kind of confided to me that a lot of the things that we struggled with Randy, she also does. And then the greatest thing happened while she was in labor, and we were waiting for the baby to be
3
born.
days, was it?
Oh, yes. God. Down to Santa Barbara. We drive down on Christmas Day.
Right.
Parker's born on the 28th of December.
Whoa.
And so we had a reservation for 2 nights, and then we were going to go home, but he still wasn't born. So we spent the last night at her in-laws, who we didn't know very well. And it was so bonding because when we got the call at 4 a.m, his mom and I were just literally jumping up and down in arms, hugging each other with excitement.
Yeah, they were screaming hysterically.
And then the 4 of us, before we got to actually see the new baby, went for this long walk down the beach and had breakfast together. And it came out that they found Randy just as secretive and unopen and kind of unsharing as we did. And that's their own kid. So the whole thing made us not take it so personally. That's just who he is and how he is. So I think that was very fortunate that all of those conversations happened. And I don't know, you can't make that happen. You just have to do the footwork and be ready, be willing to be open and honest and listen when the opportunity arises.
Are there questions about what makes a marriage work over time that I haven't asked that you can think of if you were interviewing? Oh, Gail, you left out blah, blah, blah.
Well, we don't even have to have necessarily I don't know. There's some of it is just chemistry, I think.
I was just going to say that. And the thing that I was so enamored of when I was 15 years old is still true. Like when I am, sometimes we're walking in the park and I'm behind Steve, and I really like his body build. I just like the way he is put together and how he moves, and I like how he smells, and I like how he touches me, and I love his voice, and I love his accent, and so. I don't mean that it's purely physical, but that was there in the beginning and hit me like a ton of bricks when we reconnected in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, wow, it just blew me away. Remember that night we went to La Lanterna and we stayed out really late talking, and your parents were pissed. They were still watching the kids. It was just like being in high school.
But also, I remember a time when you and I were in, where we met in 1976. We went to see Measure for Measure in Stanford with your friend Stratford, with your friend from
Joanne.
It was just before you were going to marry
Steve Wagon.
And I remember I was teaching at a school in Stratford-on-Avon, and we were sitting around. It was the end of the summer, and we were sitting around in the school, you and other teachers, just having a chat. And I remember the guy who ran the school saying to me, she's very nice, your friend. And I said, yes, but she's going to marry someone else. He said, really?
Like he thought there was something.
Yeah.
And I think your dad always knew that there was a connection between us, but your mom...
He never understood why we split up.
But your mom did not want us to get back together.
She thought it might be dangerous, So I remember you called up from when you were in Scotland.
And she never told
you. She never told me that you called. Yeah.
So I just think that these times that our paths have crossed over the years, that spark between us never changed. And it's still there.
Why did you break up in high school? Just because Steve left?
No, in high school, we broke up in high school over an unfortunate incident where it was
Laurel.
Valentine's Day, and I conceived this, in retrospect, idiotic idea that I would go around there late at night to our house and leave some daffodils.
Sweet.
Because that's my favorite flower.
But the guy across the road thought that I was breaking into the house, and he pulled a gun on me.
Oh,
no.
And called the police.
Right. And Laurel's dad drove me home,
and I never even knew what happened.
Yeah,
I was asleep.
You were asleep. You slept through the whole incident.
It was really late at night.
Yes.
But why would you break up over that? I don't get it.
I don't know. You asked your parents to stop letting you see me.
What? I don't think that's what happened. I think you started going with Debbie Moore.
No, it was because you wouldn't go out with me anymore.
Really?
Yes.
I don't think that's true.
No, that is exactly what happened.
But then we did get together anyway.
Then we got together again because I came back to California when I was at university in the summer. I came back. I was working at Stanford Linear Accelerator. I got a job through my dad with a colleague of his.
Summer after my freshman year, right? Yeah. And then we got together that summer, and then you came back the next summer after that, and it was after my sophomore year. Then you came back after my junior year. I moved in with you. We were living in this commune.
Right.
And my parents were furious and practically disowned me over that and said, if you're going to waste your money on, $50 a month in rent, that we could, when you could live at home, we're not going to pay for college. And I said, fine, I don't want to go back anyway. And that's when I never finished my term papers anyway. So I flunked out, dropped out on a full scholarship, by the way, at Brown, and to go back for 10 years to finish until later. But anyway, we wrote back and forth after that, mm-hmm. and in between. And you went back to York, and I just stayed here and worked at the USGS, and I saved my money to come over and see you in January. But right. You were with Linda.
Right. I started going out with someone else.
So I fly over there on Icelandic Air, hitchhike from London Heathrow to York University, and on a bunch of trucks. And when I got to university, he was with the woman he ended up marrying.
Oh, how sad.
You just put me in your dorm room and went off with her. And I stole all your little gem foreign language dictionaries to serve you right.
And then you didn't get together again until you visited via your friend while you were...
Right. I mean, but we did, as I said, we did see each other like later in the 70s, and we talked
right
on the
before I got
phone,
married in 78.
And we talked on the phone as well.
So
you were in Germany.
We broke up in the spring of 72.
Right.
Saw each other again in 78, and I wanted you to tell me not to get married, but you didn't tell. I wanted you to beg me to get together, but maybe you were married by then.
And then we were going to, I know, it's because before that you'd been in Germany, and we were going to maybe
76.
Maybe meet up in 78. So this was 76, 78. Yes, I get that.
But then from 78, when I married and you married and we had kids, we didn't actually see each other again until 93.
Yeah.
Wow.
15 years.
Wow.
I did call you once, but you weren't there. And I was in Boston.
Mm.
So, let's see if I can call you. You were in the phone book. I was at MIT, and they had all the phone books.
Oh, wow.
I thought, wow, I could see if Laurel's in the book, but you weren't there. So I called some teacher I knew from the Cambridge School, who was also teaching in San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
She was very surprised to hear.
My goodness. Have we covered the bases, do you think?
I think so. The bases.
All right. Well, thank you. It's been so lovely.